Back once again with Erika Brown, the publisher and editor of The Cricket, coming to us from her beautiful office in downtown Manchester by the Sea.
You always say that, and somehow I never think you mean it. Is it
I
the
do.
cardboard boxes? Is that like the ambiance that draws you?
There's some flora back there that looks nice.
Yeah, that's actually real.
Yeah,
Water
that's good.
it every week.
So how are things going, Erika? Busy, 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 or what?
Yeah, I mean, things are starting to really kick off. This past week was the official kickoff in Manchester for the commuter overlay district, what people call 40A. Is that familiar to you?
Oh
The
boy,
mandate.
40A, 40B, there's all kinds of
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
going
I
on.
know it's the 40s.
Yeah.
This actually, it's funny. I got an email from somebody who was kind of bristling by it because there's a lot of people in a lot of towns bristling from this overlay district mandate. And they said, well, this proposal, that 48 proposal, you're a little too, I think she was accusing me of being pro 48 proposal. And I'm like, it's a state law. It was signed into law by Governor Baker and it's a mandate. It's like, it's not something that's proposed by somebody. But in any case, it's something that you can't ignore. It's one, Manchester and Rockport, Essex and Gloucester, all of us are in it. We're one of 175 towns that are impacted and declared by the state to be called commuter rail municipalities. And so they're mandating for a variety of reasons. The biggest one is housing and the housing crisis. They're mandating sort of density and a zoning overlay district that mandates 15 units per acre is sort of what they're saying. And they're mandating that you do it because the commuter rail services you. And what they're hoping is that it will do things like lighten the load on traffic and congestion and cars and emissions with regard to climate change. But then really it's about housing. So it mandates the ability to kind of densify things. Now, here's what the mandate is. And I know there's a lot of discussion about this throughout Cape Ann, so people are familiar with it, but it's essentially that you draw a radius of a half a mile around the commuter rail station. And within that, towns have 2 years. So it's until December 31st, 2024. You have to actually officially opt in or opt out. And opting in is a matter of a town meeting vote. So you have to bring it to a town meeting vote and you have to pass some way of addressing this. Now, you can opt out. You don't have to opt in. So it is a mandate, it is a law, but it's not something that every town has to do. But as we discussed last week, I think, if you opt out, you are ineligible to apply for certain grants. Now, the first one is Mass Works grants, which, as far as my experience is, that's largely associated with things like infrastructure. So that's a biggie. The other one, though, which I've also covered and we've talked about, I find like, is that you're not eligible for maintenance grants from the state for housing, for the housing authorities, for subsidized housing, so public housing.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've been dealing with the last 2 years with the fact that the state hasn't provided any maintenance for these things and have been trying to like slough it down to the affordable housing trusts and the CPCs of this world. So I find that to be a toothless threat.
Kind of curious there, yeah.
But anyway, so that's what's going on. So here's what happened. What happened was the planning board and the select board had the first meeting to meet officially the first milestone, which is at the end of the month of January. Every town has to submit an action plan for the 2 years. So it's officially, the race gun has gone off now for all the towns. And for Manchester, some of the things that came up that I thought was kind of interesting is 3 major wrinkles that are just off the bat, right? For Manchester only. This is unique to Manchester, although some of them kind of are shared by Cape Ann. The first one is that radius you're talking about, our train station is a coastal train station. It comes right into town. And so the radius, half the radius, or not half, but almost half, is water. So don't you think the state should adjust the numbers based on that? That's like number one. Number two is this idea of resiliency. And this is shared by other towns, which the state doesn't seem to accommodate the fact that a lot of our rail beds, and I'm not sure, maybe up in Gloucester, this is definitely the case. In Manchester, it's definitely the case. I don't know about Rockport, but a lot of the beds go through filled in mud flats. And those are all FEMA flood zones, especially Manchester. I mean, Manchester's bad. So, you know, we have an interim planner who called the state and said, have you taken these FEMA flood zones into account? And they're like, no. So that doesn't mean they're not going to. Right. But it does really provide a kind of a wrinkle. And then the third wrinkle, and this is, I think, the biggest wrinkle off the bat, is something that was brought up by the ZBA chairman, Sarah Mellish. She said, listen, 75% of our downtown, our general district properties are non-conforming. And that's a real problem, because the good news is nearly all of the properties downtown already conform. As a matter of fact, many properties downtown that are within that radius exceed 15, far exceed 15. And many of them are historic buildings. So, I mean, think about it, like the whole of downtown, for instance, the downtown that, all the stores and the storefronts, they're already maxed out according to this. So it's not relevant, really. There are some properties that are pop up, and you can actually, I hope they do this as a town. I hope they look through almost property by property. That's what they should do, to say, okay, to dimensionalize it for people. Because things are, like, for instance, the American Legion Hall and the Masonic Hall behind Town Hall, that's like ripe. That's a candidate, I think, for this kind of zoning. The Cornerstone Church on School Street, that's a candidate. Spy Rock Hill, that's a candidate. Tappan Street, that's a candidate. Things like that. Some Summer Street properties up as you're leaving town, they're candidates. Beach Street going up towards Singing Beach, that's a candidate. But the inner downtown, that thick kind of district, our retail district, yeah, I guess they're candidates, but they're already maxed out. I don't think that's anything it's not going to change anything for that.
Interesting.
But that's where we are right now. It's an interesting thing. We're at the beginning. I know that Rockport just the select board last week passed something that was very kind of high density. They approved the concept of a pretty high density downtown, and I think it's in reaction to this. So it's starting to happen. And then we've talked in the past before about this, where Gloucester is kind of interesting to me, and I know nothing about this in Gloucester, but Gloucester's train station is not in what people consider to be the downtown. True. I mean, the thick Main Street harbor downtown. I mean, it's where Star Market is, and the Mac,
Yeah, centrally located, but not in that downtown harbor district.
Yeah, exactly. The Azorian, right? It's like right there, like that whole.
Yeah, Railroad Avenue. Yep.
Railroad Avenue, exactly. So and then also there's a second train station over by Wellspring, right? So by Wellspring House,
station,
and that could be interesting. So we'll see what each town does. I think Cape Ann, because it all shares the same topography and the same climate change implications, probably should be in touch with each other and coordinate on how they're going to deal with the folks in Boston.
Yeah, that's a big one. So when do we expect to hear something next, Erika? Is there any?
Well, what they're going to do is they're going to start on February the 13th, I believe, is the next meeting of the planning board. And what they're going to do is they're going to create with the select board kind of a task force. And it's going to be a couple members from, I think this is roughly, they're going to be a couple members from each one of them, those boards. And then they're going to have some at-large members. And then Betsy Ware and Greg Federspiel, the town administrator and the town planner, they've really taken on sort of this yeoman's work. It's funny, I called it the daunting task of dealing with this. And Betsy Ware, who's the interim planner, who's a very straightforward person, she said, I wouldn't call it daunting. And I thought, that's optimistic. I hope she's right. For the record, I hope she's right. But that's the next step. And then they're going to start going through it. The way Manchester is roughly strategizing it, they want to get to a vote A year from now, they want it to be essentially on the warrant for the spring, even though they have until the end of the year, because that way, if something goes wrong or not enough people understand it or whatever, they have time to bridge that gap, understand where they are, and then get to the end of the year. I wonder if other towns are going to do that. It's a good strategy. I don't know if that's where they'll end up, but that's where they are now.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a big story. Thanks for the update. I'm sure the Cricket will keep us posted.
Yeah.
The other cool story, Erika, right, is the Manchester Police Department just celebrated a unique anniversary.
Yeah, I was just there actually, and I haven't written it up yet, but I can tell you about it. Alan Gilson was lauded by Todd Fitzgerald and the rest of the police department for being 50 years, serving 50 years with the police department, which is only 127 years old, apparently. I did not know that. So 50 of that 127 years has been with Alan Gilson.
A lot of police in Alan.
He started with the department in 1967. And apparently, and I heard this from Todd Fitzgerald, who he saved somebody's life from drowning in 1967, just because. And the chief of police at the time said, "You ought to be a police officer." And so he did. And he's been and he finally retired in 2017, I believe it was. But the historian, the unofficial historian for the department, a guy by the detective, Michael Richards, he discovered this. And so they gave him a nice citation. Anne Margaret Ferrante was there, Bruce Tarr. And my favorite thing about it was the whole community came out, but including all of the retired police officers. They came out of the woodwork. And in Manchester, that's a real family affair. Alan Gilson's daughter, Jen Gilson, is on the police department. She's a police officer. So she was there, obviously, with his kids. But then also you had Craig McCoy, sorry. And he's retired, but his son is the second in command under Todd Fitzgerald, Mark McCoy. So there's a lot of that. Joe Aiello was there. Dave McDougall was there. The usual. I hate to say the usual suspects.
I was going to say. You won't see them in a police lineup, right?
But that was it kind of just reminds you of how interconnected it is, especially when you get to a small town like Manchester. Another thing that was really nice, you get the chief of police, Todd Fitzgerald. He's been with our police department for 31 years. This coming next month, apparently. Now, when he started with the midnight shift working with Alan Gilson, and Alan Gilson was his boss. So it's really personal, it's really connected, and it's really nice. So there you go. Congratulations to Alan Wilson. Alan Wilson, he's the moderator. I'm sorry. Alan Gilson.
There you go.
I should be like, we're joking in the office, we should be like Alan Wayside Furniture. Yeah. Alan Gilson, Alan Gilson, Alan Gilson. Say it 3 times instead of Wilson. Anyway, there you go. Congratulations to Alan Gilson.
Yeah, and Alan Wilson. Why not? We're spread the love here. So. All right, Erika, your homework assignment between this week and next is to figure out what a 40C might mean for Manchester.
Oh my God.
I don't know. It's got to be something.
Yeah, exactly. 40C. Let's make it up. Let's lobby for it.
There you go.
I got to tell you. Wait a minute. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
Because it's just we've talked so much of the planning board, because the planning board in Manchester is colorful, right? So Gary Gilbert stepped down from the planning board, and so they had to replace Gary Gilbert. They thanked him for his service, yada yada yada, right? The new person who was selected, who stepped up, was a woman I'm not familiar with. Her name is Sarah Philbrick, and she's uniquely qualified to take over, because even though she's not a planner and she does not have real estate experience or anything, she is an attorney, and she is a former U.S. attorney in Boston, as assistant U.S. attorney for 12 years in organized crime and racketeering division.
Oh, welcome to town.
She's been in town for quite a while, but yeah. Was very measured and thoughtful in her responses, and very sweet. And I shouldn't say sweet because I don't know her, but she seemed like a very earnest, nice, low-key person. And when you heard her experience, you're like, wow. So I think as an attorney, she's going to be great. But I love the fact that somebody with the racketeering, the strike task force for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston, is going to be on the planning board.
Yeah, that'll be cool to follow too. All right. Awesome stuff as always, Erika. We will see you this time next week.
Bye, Kory.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.